Doug. I forgot that we brought Doug that day. Hey, Doug. That's the dog in the back left corner. Good old Doug. Doug's a good dog. Doug's Sarah's dog. This is game 2, and it's going to be History of Iran Part 3 because I've got laundry still to do. Quickly introduce us to our players. I'm hitting the ball right there. My partner, Mike Mondello, hit the ball, but not very well, into the net. I will serve. Mike and Brian face off against Sarah and Jeremy. I'm about to serve it to Jeremy. If you weren't, you're so woke you don't see gender. Jeremy hits the top of the net. Woo-hoo-hoo! Them some quick hands there, girlfriends. All right, and like we did the last couple times, as I do laundry, you get to listen to the history of Iran. This is the last part of part 1. I think she gets up to maybe the coup of the British and the U.S. placing a Shah back in power after there's a democratically elected leader in Iran. So a very interesting history of Iran coming up right now.
National Iranian Oil Company was being created. Negotiations between the British and Iran were so intense and they were breaking down. The British were thinking about landing troops in Iran to secure what they saw as their own refineries and oil fields, and it really wasn't looking good. Mossadegh was very popular internationally. He actually even traveled to the United States. He was named Times Man of the Year in 1951. So the US and British are not in agreement. Mossadegh's not backing down. He knew that by kicking out the British, it would result in no money in the Iranian treasury. He knew that because the Iranians didn't know how to run the company. But it didn't matter. It was a matter of principle for him. And so the British had to find an angle, right? And they began saying that they worried that nationalization of the oil industry would be seen as a victory to the Russians. And British intelligence sources began telling the CIA that Mossadegh had communist leanings and that Iran would be put into the Soviet orbit if he stayed as prime minister. The US president at the time, Harry Truman, he was not so sure about this, but the British and the Shah began privately trying to depose Mossadegh as prime minister. The Shah ends up leaving the country for, quote, medical reasons, and Mossadegh is essentially running the country at this time. Then President Dwight Eisenhower replaced Harry Truman, and things began to change. Eisenhower was more easy to convince that Mossadegh was worth overthrowing. The British convinced him that Mossadegh was a communist threat and that Iran was not worth compromising over, and Eisenhower signed off on it. It was a big reversal of policy for the United States, and Mossadegh and the Iranians really weren't ready for it. They didn't see it coming. Quickly, British intelligence and the CIA, the American spy agency, began working with pro-Shah Iranians and the Iranian military, and they hatched a covert plot to depose Mossadegh. The CIA actually took the lead on this, you guys. It's pretty crazy how they did it. Eisenhower approved $1 million to the CIA station in Tehran, the capital of Iran, to end Mossadegh's reign as prime minister. The covert operation was underway to replace him with an Iranian military man. His name was General Zahedi, and they wanted to get Mohammad Reza Shah, the Shah who had left for, quote, medical reasons. They wanted to get him back into the country. So to do this, the CIA operatives paid people to protest in the streets against Mossadegh, giving the impression to the world that he was less popular than he actually was. This was a manipulation of public opinion, no doubt. Their goal was to, and I quote, create, extend, and enhance public hostility and distrust and fear of Mossadegh and the government, end of quote. They actually staged attacks on religious leaders, making it look like Mossadegh had backed the attacks. They paid newspapers to write false reports on him and have it printed all over the country. On the morning of the coup, there was a coup to replace him. They actually paid demonstrators to hit the streets in a massive anti-government rally. It was total mayhem. They hired all kinds of people, including bodybuilders, to march down the street shouting, "Long live the Shah." At first, the coup was unsuccessful, but they actually tried again, and they were successful. And on August 19th, 1953, Mossadegh, the democratically elected prime minister, was arrested by the military after they burned his house. Military and police units who were loyal to the military man, Zahedi, took control of Tehran, and Mossadegh served 3 years in prison and died under house arrest in 1967. His statement in court was, quote, "My only crime is that I nationalized the Iranian oil industry and removed from this land the network of colonialism and the political and economic influence of the greatest empire on earth," end of quote. The Shah returned to power, and in time, Mossadegh's name became much less discussed. The Shah ruled over Iran, Mohammad Reza Shah ruled over Iran until 1979. So essentially, the US planned and funded a coup to remove an elected leader from Iran and replace him with a monarch. It's very interesting. Most Americans don't know this because this information came out much later. It was hidden for a very long time. Mohammad Reza Shah, in time, signed over 40% of Iran's oil fields to US companies. The National Iranian Oil Company was what that was called, but it was mostly a facade. 40% of the shares went to Anglo-Iranian, and 40 went to the US, and the last 20 to the Dutch and the French. And the Shah became one of the US's strongest allies in the Middle East during the Cold War. The fall of Mossadegh is an enormous moment in Iranian history that I think is worth noting, and this is just me speculating. But if he had stayed in power, the history of Iran would likely be quite different, I think, than it is now. Who's to say, right? He was an older man, we don't know. Some of the authors I read believe that Iran likely would have continued on a path toward full democracy had the US not intervened. Again, who knows? Because now we know what happened on September 11th, 2001. We now know the Iraq War. We now know the war in Afghanistan. We see how democracy in Iran could have changed the course of the whole Middle East, but it didn't happen. To kind of summarize this coup, one author wrote, quote, "The coup could perhaps not have happened without mistakes of Mossadegh's own making, and in fact it nearly failed, but it certainly would not have happened without the intervention of the British SIS and the American CIA. Although the story of the coup did not emerge for many years, and perhaps has not done so fully even now, Iranians blamed these two agencies at the time and have done so bitterly ever since. The idea that everything happened in Iranian politics was manipulated by a hidden foreign hand was again reinforced, fathering dozens of improbable conspiracy theories in later years." So, Ali inserting here, it lost trust, right? The Iranian people lost trust for the United States. Mossadegh became a national hero across most ideological class and religious boundaries. The coup also had significance in a number of other ways. It established the United States in Iran as the prime ally and protector of the Pahlavi regime, and it achieved the aim of getting rid of the Soviet communist influence. But it also took away much of the enchantment the United States had previously enjoyed popularly as a virtuous alternative to the older powers such as Great Britain. The significance of the event took some time to sink in. For a while, some Iranians still believed or hoped that the Americans had been duped by the British and that fundamental US values would reassert themselves. But the United States was Prince Charming no more. End of quote. All right, let's end there. It's a bit of a doozy. I'm going to do a little summary list for you and then my takeaway. In summary, first, Iran was once called Persia, has a long history, thousands of years, very immense. At one point, they ruled over half the world's population. The Shia sect of Islam is very important in Iran, and it is also the minority sect in Islam. And Iran was ruled by shahs or kings for many years. Second, Iran began to flirt with democracy in the early 1900s. The Majlis, or Iranian parliament, is formed around this time. And Iranians don't have a very high standard of living during this time in the early 1900s. In 1908, oil was discovered. The British formed the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. Most of the profits go straight to Britain. Iran was very unstable during this time, very little trust in the Shah or the Qajar dynasty at the time. Then we have Reza coming onto the scene, and he becomes a Shah dictator, an outsider. He modernizes and secularizes Iran, much less focused on religion. He's not loved, he's feared, he's tough. He begins calling Persia Iran in 1935. He flirts with Hitler and the Germans. Then, during World War II, the British and Soviets step in, and Reza is sent into exile. His son takes his place. The young Mohammad Reza becomes a British puppet of sorts. Then Mossadegh comes onto the scene. He becomes prime minister, launches a revolution for nationalizing the oil.
Man, I am in the kitchen there. For show. Look at my foot here. This is so obviously in the kitchen. That is a lot of cheating. Let's go back to Wiser World, the recap.
In Iran, kicking out the British, and despite most Iranians liking the United States at the time, the U.S. does get involved in this, and together with the British, CIA funds and plans a coup against Mossadegh, bringing the Shah and a military man to replace Mossadegh as prime minister. This changes the future of Iran and the Middle East and halts any progress toward democracy. So much meaty history in this episode that it's hard to just pick one takeaway, but I think that my major takeaway in studying the last multiple countries, and especially the 1953 coup in Iran, is that what I see is not always truth. And that has been helpful to me as I have, kept up with things going on in the world, that just because there's a video of it or just because there's a picture of it doesn't necessarily mean that we have all of the information that we can rush to conclusions. For example, the 1953 coup, a lot of those protesters were paid. And I think that's just an important thing to keep in mind. It makes us a little bit more wiser, a little more discerning as we see images constantly on our phones about what's going on in the world. Keep in mind, we might have information that comes out about this particular issue in 40 years that we don't see now. And so it just gives us a little more context, a little more pause. Hopefully it makes us a little bit more wise. I think it's done that for me. Studying this as maybe just a little stop, pause, let's take a break here and see what could be going on behind the scenes that I can't see right here in this moment. So I think that's my major takeaway of this first part of Iran. I hope that you've learned something. I hope that you have become a little wiser, learned something about a country you knew very little about. Keep listening to part 2 and part 3 because part 1 absolutely plays into it. Thank you so much for listening and sharing, and let's go out and make the world a little wiser.
Thanks to my friends at Wiser World for the overview of the history of Iran. I've got 2 more episodes to go. I think I've got a couple more pickleball games to throw out there, so we'll get through a little bit more. And we'll return to pickleball. Heli Memnun for the expert podcasts. Wiser World's a podcast. I feel like I should do an ad for it since I'm using their stuff. It's free. There's a couple ads on there, but you can always hit that forward button, get right through the ads. You want to support her efforts. She has a Patreon site. But she has, I don't know, maybe 100 different episodes talking about different countries all around the world and their basic histories. If you're going to go visit a country, I recommend it as a good way to understand the culture and the history of where you're headed to. And as world events occur, I think it's good to have a little bit of a balanced opinion about the countries that are involved. And obviously, Israel and Iran and the U.S., as I make this video, are very entangled into some Middle Eastern bombings and other things going on. I don't consider myself anywhere near expert on Iran, but I certainly know a little bit about them. And, it's one of those things as a kid, you always hear, oh, they just march around and say death to Iran, and they're a bunch of fanatics, and they're all uneducated farmers. In reality, they have currently today, a higher literacy rate than we do in the U.S. So they have focused on education including the women, which surprised me because their theocracy obviously is very male-oriented, but the fact that they are educating a very high percent of their total population is a admirable thing. The other thing, obviously, is when they say death to America and mad at America, man, they've got a little reason to it, right? The British and the French before them really did manipulate and doing a lot of took advantage of a lot of the Middle East and certainly Iran as well. Iran, when you talk Farsi, a lot of the words they speak are actually French-based for the time that the French were there. So, though I know just very little Farsi, you'll find words like garçon for boy and things like that also sneak into modern Persian language. Anyway, the fact that they had an imperfect and aggressive but democratically elected leader, and he wasn't doing what the British and the Americans really wanted, and that was probably mostly from a financial reason, that we literally drove a coup, bribed people, drove protests in the street, bought off politicians and bought off military, and basically ended their leadership and put our own guy back, the Shah, who for at least for a while was a puppet U.S. and eventually, he kind of wrangled us the wrong way as well. Anyway, just some of the history is very interesting. For the 1 or 1.5 people that watch this video, and the hopefully thousands of people that watch that podcast. Jeremy comes flying across. Did he get in the kitchen? I don't know if we're going to see it very well. We're going to go frame by frame. That left foot's what I'm going to be worried about. We're not going to see it because of Mike, right? Man, that I think his right foot might be in. We don't know about the left foot. Yeah. That looks like it's on the line to me, but I can't tell you for sure. He's certainly outside eventually. Too close to call live. Even on the video, I'm not sure he was in. It just off the bat looked close. Don't know where the points are here. I think Sarah won almost every game she played, so we're probably behind. Ball was out. And that is the game, just like that. We've learned about Iran, and we've watched some pickleball. This is from beautiful Tampa, Florida, McFarland Park. I'm headed back to that camera. I'm going to turn it off, so I'll turn this off before I turn that off.